Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hi, welcome to Ilanomics. Over the last 2 weeks, we have spoken about the significant amendments brought by the Modi government in the form of ordinances to reform agriculture and improve the lot of the farmers. The first one was about the Essential Commodities Act and the second one was about contract farming. Today we will speak about an equally significant amendment and ordinance, which is basically the legal framework governing APMCs or Agricultural Produce Marketing Committees. We have Professor Ila Patnaik joining us from her residence via SIMSAT. Ila, this third amendment or the third ordinance, so to speak, governs APMCs and how APMCs do business and how farmers and their livelihoods are completely dependent on APMCs so far. Why do you think this is equally sweeping?
So, Vaipi, let me start with a little bit of history and that will explain why it's so important. In the 50s or so, when APMCs were first set up, the idea was that there was no physical market infrastructure where farmers could go and sell their produce. So the mandis would be just open fairs on a certain day of the month or at the time of the harvest when farmers would sell their produce. What APMCs allowed them to do was to have a specific marketplace, a structure where they could go and sell their produce. Now, all that was fine, and it was with the intent of helping farmers to get better prices and to get them to a place where they could go, they could sell their produce without being dependent on the local trader. However, what happened was that it became illegal to sell anything outside the APMC. So the farmer then became entirely dependent on the traders who were licensed traders in those markets or the mandis in the specified area, and they could sell only there. So they were not allowed to sell elsewhere. So, two farmers couldn't do a trade outside an APMC. Now, these provisions were obviously very restrictive and they restricted the freedom of farmers. So what was done slowly over the years and, in many states was that they would say, okay, we allow you to sell outside the APMC. However, you still have to pay the APMC fee. So suppose there was a 2% fee that had to be paid inside when you were trading in APMCs or selling your produce in APMCs. Now you could sell it outside, but you still had to pay the APMC fee. Now, again, if you think about it, this puts a burden on the farmer and restricts the farmer. So what is being done through this ordinance is that restriction has been taken away. It explicitly says that while the laws that apply for APMCs, so states have these agricultural produce marketing committees and various laws and regulations and bylaws and so on, they will continue to apply in that market space. But outside that, it's given farmers freedom. It explicitly says that no APMC fees has to be paid when you're transacting outside that market. If the state government wishes, it could impose a tax. But other than the thing that is directly done overall at the level of the state or the center, or tomorrow, if there was a decision to bring this under the GST, bring agricultural produce under GST, those changes could be made. But as far as the APMC fees is concerned, farmers no longer have to pay that fee. So that's really the major change and the freedom that has been given to farmers through this.
Isn't it so amazing, Ila, that the farmers' trade or, the livelihood of farmers was so strictly regulated and controlled until now, and so little has been known or talked about it outside, obviously, the restricted academic and technical circles, because we think India has been liberalized and we have the license to, or the freedom to practice whatever trade and work wherever we want. But the farmer and his livelihood has been so strictly regulated and so little of this has been actually known to the general citizens.
Absolutely. I think it is shocking because when we talk about the 91 liberalization, we assume that the economy was liberalized. Very few of us, other than in academic circles, point out that agriculture was actually not liberalized and that you did not give farmers that freedom, despite the fact that the Constitution, so Part 13 of the Constitution, so section articles 301 to 306, actually make it very clear that in India, there should be a free trade, commerce and intercourse. That is, you have, whether it is goods, whether it is services, there should be a national market and there should not be restrictions in trade and commerce or movement of goods or services or people within the country. But I think we've pretty much ignored this aspect of the Constitution because this became, tied up in politics, in power, in interests of incumbents, in lobbies, and very few states were able to actually break that and make a change. But really, we still don't have a national market for food. And think about how interesting it is that we get produce from, say, New Zealand or elsewhere far more easily in our local markets, and not things that are grown in many parts of the country, whether in Bengal or in Tamil Nadu or Maharashtra, or many parts of the country are not available in our local markets.
You talk about in your column this week, Ila, about the reforms, if they are executed the way they should be on the ground, will lead to better prices for farmers, more freedom. But you also talk about how it will help consumers like you and me, because there is something called the farm to fork markup, which adds on to the prices we pay for our agricultural products. Can you explain that for us?
See, so far through the APMC Act, we have given monopoly to traders who held licenses for trading. Now, if you take that monopoly away, which is what this ordinance does, then other people will be free to enter the business. They'll be free to enter these supply chains, buy produce from farmers and sell them. So currently, you've often heard about margins as high as 60-70%, whereas normal margins would be 15%, 17%, which would, of course, if there's a trader who's doing a business, who's picking up produce from a farm, coming and selling it in the city, then he has costs and reasonable profits. And those would constitute about, 15 to 20%. But in India, because of the monopoly, these margins were in some cases very, very high. And as more businesses will enter over the years, these margins will necessarily come down. We often make a distinction between monopolistic markets and perfectly competitive markets. And in competitive markets, prices for the consumer are lower because you don't have that excess profit that a monopolist makes. So in this case as well, because we have now, with the ordinance, taken that monopoly power away, so, APMCs themselves might, over the years, need to become more competitive. They need to perhaps charge, less. They need to pay higher prices to farmers, charge less fees, and maybe provide a better service. Effectively, they're providing a service. So like we saw in the case of airlines or MTNL, when private producers, private traders, private service providers were allowed to enter the market, the services available for consumers became better and became cheaper. So that's again something that economics tells us is what would happen in these markets. Though I must say it won't happen overnight. These are long-term reforms. We've seen 70 years of restrictions, monopolies, farmers not getting good prices, and it'll take some time to get away from the burden of those 70 years.
But not everyone seems to be happy, Ela. I mean, one prominent agricultural state, Punjab, which we have all studied, is the bread basket of India, has objected to these ordinances and these changes. And there are some experts who are also saying that, that this it takes away control from the states and gives too much freedom to the farmers, and this probably deregulates too much. Is that even a valid argument, Ela?
See, I think this is more of politics. The fact that APMCs have fees, and those fees are not very clearly going into a certain fund. So then they are often used by sometimes the APMC, sometimes the district government, sometimes the state government. And because they generate fee, you certainly wouldn't like that farmers should be able to trade without that fee. Because so that one big change that this is giving is the freedom for two people to trade without paying an APMC fee. So that fees is going away. Now, as far as the argument that is given that it is an attack on the federal structure, as far as that goes, I really feel that we had forgotten the emphasis that was put by the Constitution on free trade within the country. And because we had created all these monopolies, because states had put restrictions, thanks to whatever might be the historical reasons, even if today we felt that this was not what was envisaged to be, though I don't believe that is the case, but even if that was the case, I would say that today, given how technology has moved, how markets are, we should be able to work towards a national market for food. And that cannot happen if states put barriers and restrictions on interstate movement of produce. And here it was not just interstate movement. I mean, you couldn't go, you had to sell in a specific APMC. You could not sell in a different APMC. So here it was much worse. So I think that this is an ordinance and a law whose time has come, definitely come, that we need to move towards that, towards a national market for food. And eventually, farmers and states which depend on farming will eventually do much better, because they'll have a bigger market, they'll have a more competitive market, their farmers will be able to progress, even though for some time they will not be happy about it.
Mm-hmm. In fact, the argument you have made, Ela, is that the APMCs and the laws that governed APMCs impinged on, the normal constitutional freedoms all of us are granted.
Yes, so my co-author, Shubho Roy, who is a law graduate, has often pointed out to me that, look, our constitution was, when it was drafted, was written for a country that would allow markets to function. And you can see that very clearly in, as we mentioned in part 13 and articles 301 to 306. And the fact that APMC laws, which were restricted, required presidential assent before actually being tabled in their legislative assemblies for being passed, that meant that they were restrictive. And they were actually not what was in line with the idea of India as a national market. So he often points out to me that we were, like in many, many other things, we were restricting freedoms of economic agents, of producers, households, businesses in India. And slowly it is hard work to, get those freedoms back, but we need to.
Mm-hmm. So, taken together, these three ordinances, which have been enacted together and will be implemented in the coming weeks and months, are an effort by the government to normalize farming, give farmers the same kind of freedom the rest of the sectors enjoy, and hopefully reap the same kind of benefits the other sectors have been able to do since liberalization. Hopefully, you enjoyed and liked watching our 3 special episodes focused on agriculture. Thanks for watching this 3rd episode as well. And I would like to thank all our subscribers who have paid and taken subscriptions of ThePrint. And if you have not done that, please do and take subscriptions. You just have to go to theprint.in/contribute and you will have the link there to take our subscriptions. We need people to pay for good journalism, and we value our readers and viewers. Thanks for watching this episode. We will be back with a new one next week. Keep watching us.